Hi, everyone, and welcome to Finding Your Bliss, the show that helps you find and follow your bliss. I'm Judy Librach, and I have to tell you about the first time that I met the beautiful, brainy, and friendly broadcaster with the 1,000-watt smile, Pooja Handa. We met at the Diwali 2023 Festival of Lights UHN Foundation Gala, and she was emceeing that with CHFI co-host Gurdeep Ahluwalia. And when I saw her for the first time, she just looked like a star. Like, honestly, that's how I would have to describe you, like a movie star. And I've always been fascinated by her life and career. And I mentioned that evening that I'd love to have her on the show. And so here we are. Sometimes it's as simple as that, right? You
Yep.
got to be a make it happen kind of person, which I know you know all about. Before we meet Pooja, let me tell you a little bit more about her. Torontonians have come to know award-winning broadcaster Pooja Handa as one of the familiar faces greeting them every morning to help start their day with a smile. She has spent almost 20 years, which is shocking because she's so young, working on air in television as a news anchor, reporter, and TV host, covering everything from politics to entertainment, as well as contributing to major events taking place in Toronto. She's hosted broadcasts for the annual Pride Parade and Caribbean Carnival Grand Parade, and she's reported from the red carpet at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. Before joining the Pooja and Gurdeep Show on 98.1 CHFI, Pooja also worked as a morning show host on CP24 Breakfast, and she, at the time, also made regular appearances on CTV's The Social and the Marilyn Dennis Show. Her career in television started as a traffic reporter and entertainment host for Global Morning News in Toronto in 2003. Pooja's love of performing started at a young age. At 18 years old, she auditioned and was accepted into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, and then she decided to move back to Toronto to pursue her career in broadcasting. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Women's Studies from York University and a diploma in broadcast journalism from Seneca College. As a second-generation South Asian Canadian, Pooja has been very active in her community and has made giving back a complete priority. She's worked with several charities and continues to mentor young women, which I love, in their career paths. Pooja has also used her platform to help normalize infertility after sharing her struggles with starting a family. When Pooja's not working, you may find her at a Raptors or a Leafs game. She loves trying out new recipes, traveling, and entertaining in her spare time. Pooja lives with her husband, Paul, and 2 children in Toronto. You can also watch Pooja regularly on breakfast television, Cityline, and the Shopping Channel. Pooja Handa, welcome to Finding Your Bliss. So delighted to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Judy. And I felt a real sense of warmth the first time I met you. And so it was like, yeah, I want to come on your show. I want more of this.
Love that. I love, Pooja, that you've always loved performing, even as a little girl. And long before your career as a broadcast journalist, you always wanted to be an actor. And as mentioned, at 18, you auditioned and got accepted at AMDA, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And I smile when I say that because my daughter is in New York doing a very similar thing. And you ultimately realized as a teenager in the Big Apple that it was pretty overwhelming, not to mention expensive, and you were young. You were 18 years old at the time. And you decided, I think very wisely, to marry your love of performing with broadcast journalism. And so you came back to Toronto to pursue your education. And before we get to this dazzling broadcast career that you have, I just want to ask about your days at Cawthra Park Secondary School and Arts High School in Mississauga. You always dreamed of being an actress since you were a child. So I'm just wondering, what is your first memory of performing on a stage? And what do you love about performing?
Oh, wow. So I was one of those kids who just was performing all the time. So I would put on like little plays at home. If we got together with family or family friends, I would do impressions of my aunties and uncles, and they all would just like circle around me and clap and laugh. And so I was just always that kid. And this is going to be shocking to you, but I played outside. And when I say played, I mean playing house, okay, which to me was acting. But anyway,
Yes.
was playing house until grade 9.
Wow.
Grade 9. You're 14 in grade 9. So
Yes.
for me, it's just, and I think to this day, I'm still playing. I love like performing for me is just, it's so much fun. And it's different in broadcast, of course, because you're being yourself, but there is always this sense of performance as well, because you're on air and there's sort of this adrenaline part to it. But with
Yes.
acting, you get to take on sort of any character, and that part was always really exciting to me as well. I think in the end, I ended up exactly where I wanted to be because I wasn't as good, wasn't that great of an actress. I think I'm just much better at being myself is really where it ended up, and probably for the best. But acting was the first love. I do think that it's one of those things that it doesn't have to be over. I'm
I
almost
was going to
45,
ask you. Yes. Yes.
and
I was going
never
to ask
say
you
never.
if you still have that acting bug in you that
Yeah.
occasionally pops out and says, "Hey, I'd love to actually do this and go to this audition as an actor."
Yeah. And in fairness to the timing of things, sometimes I think you can do all the right things at the wrong time. And I think me being in New York at 18,
Yeah.
knowing nothing about the real world or what it was like, growing up in a pretty sheltered life in Mississauga, and then
Yes.
moving to the Big Apple and understanding that things were very different there. They weren't the kindest, nicest people back then. They're much nicer now. And also on top of that, it was so expensive, and my parents just did not have the money to be able to support me there. I couldn't work legally, so I couldn't even make my own way there because I was on a student visa. So there were a lot of things at play that were really a good, healthy dose of the real world.
Yeah.
And that, these are the things at 18 I had to start to learn, that just because you want something and just because you think, okay, this is my dream, maybe the timing isn't right, because even people who looked like me,
Yes.
I didn't see them. Not in mainstream media, not in the movies, not on
Right.
TV,
Right.
not in the roles I wanted. So I think maybe the timing was off. So at 45, maybe the timing's right now.
Cool. That's so cool. I know you're a very beloved and respected broadcast journalist, and it's so fascinating that you came back to Toronto and you got really busy. First you attended York University for women's studies, followed by attending Seneca College for broadcast journalism. And this was really the perfect marriage, because suddenly you're combining your love of performing with being on camera and being a journalist, and using, because I sense you're always a very good student as well. You're very bright. You've got the whole package. But what mostly fascinated me about studying your whole career is that it's unheard of to get a gig in a major market like Toronto right off the bat. Most young journalists have to go to Barrie or Geraldton, Ontario, or Belleville or Alberta to
Yep.
get their first broadcasting gig, but that's not what happened to you. You were actually working at 3 different places in Toronto. You interned at a radio station. You also had a behind the scenes gig at Global, and you were working at Rogers. And I know that Rogers plays very well. I did that as well. And your internship at Global News ultimately developed into a paid position. But it's what you did to make that happen. So you did it all. You answered phones, became a screen operator, worked in the graphics department, wrote news copy. What are your memories of that thing called interning? I think a lot of kids today don't even know what we did as
Yes,
interns, right?
for free
For
too.
free.
I
Totally.
mean,
Yeah.
and it was a wonderful time in terms of being a sponge and just learning everything. How does a newsroom work? Who does what? How does everything sort of come together? So I really appreciate my days as an intern. But what I knew from what I learned in school was that often what happens is you get an internship. You're lucky enough to be there, and then nobody trusts you to do anything because you're this kid in school. So you
Hmm.
just sit in a corner and you watch. And I was determined to not let that happen, because I
Wow.
was like, listen, if I'm going to make an impression and hopefully get a job out of this internship, I have to do more than just sit there. So I would do things. So I was interning with a woman named Christine Crosby, who has
Yes.
sadly since passed.
Yes.
She was a health reporter, and I just loved watching her. And so I wanted to intern with her. And I would wait for her to come in, but I'd get in before her, and I'd scour the newspapers and a
Yes.
lot of the magazine articles back then, not so much on the internet that early. And I would just sort of highlight some stories, some health stories that I thought maybe, would be worthy of her newscast that day. And maybe very presumptuous on my part. 'Cause again, I'm just a kid right out of school. What do I know about anything? But by no means was I trying to tell her what she should do, but I just wanted to get an idea of her new sense and the way
Wow.
she gathers, stories and what she thinks is a good story, what makes for a good story for air and what doesn't. So I approached it from that angle. And so she came in and she already had like a bunch of stories on her desk and she was impressed by that. And she would go to record something in the studio, and on her way out she'd say, oh, my desk is so messy, and while she was gone I cleaned her desk.
Wow.
Or
So
she'd say, oh, look, I've got all these books here, they're just filled with recipes. I do a healthy recipe every Friday. Ignore the books, I get books all the time. So then I put all the books in alphabetical order. I
oh.
went through them and found recipes that were healthy, and I earmarked them and put a little note as like, this is a zucchini muffin recipe, and kind of just did my own thing so that I was busy the whole time I was there. And by the time my internship ended, she walked into her boss's office and she said, I know you don't have anything. I know there are no jobs in this business, but you need to hire Pooja because this
Wow.
this girl's got the fire in the belly. She wants it. She's gone above and beyond. I haven't asked her to do a thing, and she has really, shown up. So he hired me immediately. So I got my first job before even graduating
Yes.
uh, at Global behind the scenes. And then my next goal was, well, how do I get on air?
Get on there. And I
Yeah.
love this story because you were literally playing the teleprompter for people, helping them read their scripts. And all of a sudden this on-air position came up and you auditioned for it, and then you thought it didn't go very well, I don't know what I'm doing and it's never going to happen. So you took one of your other three interning jobs at Rogers, and they offered you a paid position, and you said to Global, well, bye, I got hired. And they went, wait. And what happened?
Yeah, they said before you take that other job, they're seriously considering you for a brand new morning show on Global in
Oh.
Toronto. And I was like, there's no way. I had an interview. It lasted 5 minutes. Like, whose interview lasts 5 minutes? They were definitely not interested in me. They already knew who they were going to hire. I worked there, so they had to give me an interview, and I get it. But I think what happened is the person that they offered the job to turned it down because they got another job. And so that person is none other than Dina Pugliese. Because we,
No way. Who you worked in
yes,
the library with 20 years ago. You worked
yes,
in the library. No way. That's
yes. So we worked
crazy.
together,
Oh my.
and we all knew that she was going to be the choice for the morning show because she was so fabulous, and she deserved it. She earned it. She's worked there much longer than I had. She had the experience, and anytime anybody met her, said, "Why are you not on TV? You were amazing."
Right.
But she got multiple job offers, so she was out of there, and they were 2 weeks to launch with no person to do this traffic job. And I guess they realized, well, if Rogers is paying her and has hired her, maybe we should look at her tape. Maybe there is something there. And luckily, while I
Wow.
was there as both an intern and as an editorial assistant working behind the scenes, I was showing my tape to other people on air and getting feedback and how can I be better and what can I do better. So I luckily was at a place where I think some of the people who worked at Global could vouch for me and say, she needs some work. She's very green. She's right out of school. She's not going to be perfect, but with some time, she can be good. So I always tell that part of the story because I think people sometimes forget it never just happens
So
like
true.
this, right?
So
I
true.
was in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
Somebody said no, and that's how the door opened for me. People had to help me to get there. There
Yes.
were a lot of things at play, but when that opportunity came, I was ready.
Oh, that story is such a great blueprint. You're so right. And it kind of reminds me of the person being the swing or the alternate on Broadway. And then someone gets sick and you get to go on. And that's how you get to go in the touring company or get
Yes.
to be part of the company. So it's so true, but you got to do the work. And you did the work. You came to work an hour early. You were taking all the clippings from the newspaper and putting them on your mentor, your boss's desk. You did all of those things. And so you were an obvious person, but still, what a trip to not have to go to Barrie or to go anywhere else. So what was that first day like on air? And was it as a traffic reporter or entertainment or both? What do you remember about that first day, that outfit, that whole thing?
Oh, goodness. Well, first they told me I got to go to hair and makeup, and I was like,
What?
someone's gonna do my hair and makeup? And like that was the most exciting thing because you think TV's so glamorous, but that's the part that you're most excited about.
Yes.
And then they did my hair and makeup, and I was like, I look like this? Because, I was never capable of doing my own hair and makeup that well, but, having professionals do it, you look great. So I felt great. So I felt really confident in that way.
Yes.
But I was shaking in my boots. I, you know, told a little white lie that I knew the roads really well in Toronto, which I didn't. But what I did is in the time that I had, the 2 weeks in the lead up to getting the job, is I memorized all of the routes and the exits along all the major highways on my
Wow.
Pearlie's map book
Burley's.
so that if I ever had to give a traffic report, I would at least know the exits and, the roads and know alternate routes and things that I could ad lib if I needed to, because there was no script. You had to ad lib. And I
Oh,
listened to a lot of 680 News and heard the way they were doing their traffic reports. And I'd practice and, in front of a mirror and
with the brush in front of
with
the
the brush,
mirror.
yes, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and that continued, I would say, for a good 3 months of just being scared every time they came to
Wow.
me. But still, I had been on air at Rogers. I'd been on air in college. So I felt like I was comfortable with that part. What I
Yes.
wasn't comfortable with was feeling like I'm 24 and nobody's going to believe anything that comes out of my mouth and I'm faking it till I make it. And I think the confidence part of, okay, no, you know what? No, you do know this. You did the
Yeah.
work. You studied. You've been preparing your entire school life, that career to get to this point. So
Yes.
once I got into the confidence of it, it was great. And then that led to more segments and that included entertainment. And then I got my own segment called the PH Factor that got sponsored. So I was bringing in money to the show, which is always a good thing for, the executives.
I love
So
that
great.
the Pooja Handa PH Factor show was your own brainchild. What was that? Like, was that feel good stories, happy, good news stories and entertainment? Like, what did you do in that segment?
We sort of just picked out some entertainment stories. And when I say we, I mean I, because in order for me to get the segment, I had to do everything. So I was like, don't worry, I'll find it. I'll get you the edit points. I'll write it. I'll do the whole thing. Just please let me do this because I want to show you that I can do more. And I think that's sort of what I learned in this business is that it's one thing to tell people what you can do, and it's another thing to show people. So
Yes.
I knew if I could just show them, that could turn into something. So the more I did entertainment, the more they saw that I had a personality and that my chemistry with the other on air people was really what made the segment sort of shine. And
Yes.
so that's when they built this segment with, a branding and whatnot to make it legitimate. But I
Yes.
think that was sort of the first step into, okay, she can do a lot more than traffic.
Absolutely. You also have a huge, Pooja, you have a huge likability factor, the LF factor. Like it's unmistakable, and that's part of it too. You're very real. You're very approachable, and people, you're like the best friend or the girl next door, and I think people really love that. And listen, I think it's stood you in great stead. So you get your job at Global. You're doing great. Are you getting noticed yet? Is this around the time where people are starting to little ripple when you go outside that they're like, I know you, you're on TV.
Well, yes and no. People would say things like, "Hey, it's Nalini Sharma," and I'd be like, "No, it's not." But hi, or "Hi, it's Mara Nasser," and I'd be like, "No, it's not her
Parnasser.
either." So I got mistaken for a lot of other people who kind of look like me
Yes.
for a long time. It takes a very long time for people to have sort of that name recognition. But my family and my family friend circle, I mean, they were just
Oh.
thrilled and over the moon, and they told everybody, and so everybody was watching Global Morning, and I think it was really just my family who was writing in because they were all watching. So that was fantastic. But I also knew that it was just a really great place to start a career, because I had a chance to make a lot of mistakes and be really green on air and get better and really get to a place where I was ready for that next step, which was CP24.
CP24. And that's like, then already we're in the big time. You get this unbelievable gig. So you've done all of this, you've done Global Morning News and all this stuff. And this big break comes when you joined CP24 as an anchor in 2008. And then you hosted CP24 Breakfast on Saturdays and Sundays. And I should also just tell our listeners that you're also getting up really early in the morning. This was around the time that the 3 a.m. started, right? Like this
Yep.
was the early mornings. And I just have to stop you there for a minute and ask, how have you done that? How are you able to get up that early and have the discipline to go to bed at 8 p.m. at night? Like that's hard. You're a young person and you probably want to go and party and do different things. And what gave you the focus and the discipline just to say, no, I need my beauty sleep at 8 p.m., need to get up early and be ready for my day?
Well, it probably helps that you're 25, right?
Yes,
You know,
that's true.
when you're 25, you don't need your sleep.
Yeah,
I
what
don't need
sleep?
sleep.
It's true.
So, maybe it was easier to function back then. Not so much now. Now it's, if I don't sleep, you will hear it. But I think for me, it was just that I knew I was building something, and I knew that it was such a tough business to get into. And I had the privilege of being in people's living rooms every morning, and I didn't take it for granted. I really just was just so happy to be there and to be, have a
Yes.
seat at the table, any seat at that point.
Yes.
So I think for me, it just was, these are the sacrifices you make. And, like I'll worry about a life and going out and family
All
and all
that
those
stuff.
things later.
Yes.
But I also was really lucky that I had so many wonderful mentors and people that I just really looked up to who had families who were in the business, and they were
Yes.
doing it. They were somehow juggling it, and they were also waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think when I saw it was possible that, if they can do it, maybe I can do it one day too. I think that sort of just gave me that sense of peace that one day it will all work itself out and it will be okay.
Absolutely. How would you describe those early years, or even just that first? You remember the audition for CP24? Because that's pretty exciting stuff. That's already the big time.
Well, so luckily, I met with one of the people who was doing the hiring before I had to do any sort of auditioning. I guess I didn't really even audition now that I think about it. They had watched me on Global and wanted to meet. So we met for a coffee kind of in secret, and we met at a chapters, and, we're having our discussion. We're wrapping it up. It went really well. And as we're wrapping it up, somebody walked by and went, "Oh, hey, are you Pooja from Global?" And I
Oh,
said,
great.
"Yes." And he said, "Oh, I love watching you. I love the PH Factor." And I said, "Oh, thanks. Thanks for
Oh,
watching."
wow.
And they walked away. And the gentleman who was interviewing me goes, "Really?
Nice
Okay.
plant.
How
And
much
it
did you
wasn't.
pay him to come and do that?" And I was like, I swear to God." But
That's
I really
fabulous.
think that gentleman sealed the deal, that, okay,
Yes.
this is somebody who people like, obviously, where they're stopping her to tell her that they like her segment. And
Yes.
so I didn't really even need to audition. I think sort of what they were seeing on air at Global was my audition tape, if you will. And they just sort of had to meet with me to go over what this was. And at the time, they were rebuilding CP24 and from the
Yes.
ground up. So they were trying to turn it into a breaking news station. And they basically said, "Look, we're going to need you to do everything. You are going to do weather. You're going to do traffic. You're going to report. You're going to anchor. You're going to host. So are you ready? Is this something that you
You're
think
up
you
for.
can do?" Yeah. And that was so exciting to me to build something from the ground up.
Wow. Is there an epiphany from that time or a moment that stands out where you just went, wow, it doesn't get any better than this?
I was probably too busy being really scared out of my mind. Because as much as I, had gained some experience, it was 5 years on air in Toronto at Global. I think that, anytime you're taking on something new, like I had never anchored the news before, I had never reported before. I had done stories, I'd packaged stories for other reporters, but I hadn't been the one to actually be in front of it. So I think all those things, trying something new for the first time for, hundreds of thousands of people to watch you do, is
Yes.
so nerve-wracking. But there was also something really exciting about it. And, people talk about being uncomfortable. I actually really have realized about myself, I love the idea of being uncomfortable and scared because
Wow, that's
as
good.
uncomfortable, yeah, as uncomfortable as it is, when you actually, I don't know, somehow accomplish the goal that you set out, there is a satisfaction like no other because you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I
Yes.
worked really hard. I made it happen and it was okay. And I'm going to get better from here. And so
Awesome.
it's a constant pep talk, but there is something really gratifying about setting your mind to something and then actually making it happen.
So cool. Did you like the jacket look, or were you like Farah Nasser, who's been on this show, who said no jacket, just dresses?
They didn't like that blazer look. They were very much into like, we don't want to be that newscast. We want to make sure that it's a little bit more casual. So yeah, I wore the dresses. And I remember the first time I wore something sleeveless on air and somebody wrote in and said, she's showing her
Oh
shoulders.
my
And I was like,
gosh.
oh. So I became very self-conscious of my shoulders suddenly. And then I was like, they're just shoulders. What's the
Exactly.
problem? And then you become uber aware that, especially in that medium, that so much of how you communicate is
Yes.
lost. Like people are looking at so much more than they're actually digesting. So it's very
Yes.
important that, you kind of figure out that whole
The
balance. You don't want
vibe,
to be a
right?
distraction, but you want to be yourself. I mean, people wear sleeveless outfits. It's okay.
Absolutely. What about crop tops nowadays
Oh,
and off
goodness.
the shoulder? And oh my God.
I wouldn't have dared back then.
Another very cool career breakthrough for you, Pooja, was when you and Gurdeep were named the new co-hosts of 98.1 CHFI's morning show in Toronto. You came out of a cleverly disguised, larger than life wrapped gift with a bow, and that would be the start of your morning show on CHFI from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. on weekdays. And of course, this also included a weekly appearance on breakfast television and many more things, appearances on the Marilyn Dennis Show and on the social and so many cool things. Can you tell us about the big reveal that was posted on national television of this very exciting announcement? Like I felt the excitement just watching those clips.
It was so fun. And it was so nice of the folks at CHFI to give us sort of that warm welcome, to do a big thing, to be able to introduce us. And my biggest fear was they were going to, go 3, 2, 1. We were going to pop out of the box and people be like, who are the new hosts? Luckily, that didn't happen. They did know who we were, which was awesome. But we were in this box that they actually made. They constructed themselves in the dark.
Oh my
So
God.
Pradeep and I are in this box, and we asked for breathing holes. Because that's important because we were
Yes.
in there for
Minor
like
consideration.
minor detail. We were in there for half an hour, and we just had flashlights that we would put underneath our faces to be able to communicate.
Oh
But
my God.
it was memorable because it was, again, so scary. You leave a career in television where I felt like I got to a place where I really felt comfortable and I didn't have
Yes.
to think about it. And it was easy breezy. I was very much in my comfort zone, doing virtually everything in TV. And
Yes.
to now make the switch from TV to radio, which, I interned at a radio station, but did I know anything about radio? No.
Yeah.
So going back to that really scary place of, I can't believe that after 20 years of an established career, I'm going to do something risky and brand new and something I know nothing about, and I'm going to start
Yes.
all over. And I have to just sort of believe in myself and believe in my co-hosts that we were meant to do this. And that part was really exciting.
Wow, that's so fabulous. And so now you find out you're going to be on the radio every morning as a co-host. You're also going to be on breakfast television and on the Marilyn Dennis Show, which is not on the air anymore, but on that show. But I thought it was so cool when I read that you were also invited to be part of the social, which I is one of my favorite shows. All of the hosts of that show practically have been on this show. Do you have a favorite memory of being on the social, and what do you love about doing that show?
So the wonderful thing is, so when I did the social and Marilyn Dennis, I was still at CP24 at the time.
Mm,
And what it was I was starting to get to a place where I wanted more and I wanted to do other things. And there just wasn't anything left to do. So we had some discussions, and I spoke with some people on the other side, outside of news. And I said, look, this is really where I want to be in the lifestyle space. And is there something we can do here? And they were wonderful and said, how about filling in? Would you want to fill in on the social? And I was like, absolutely. And knowing Melissa Grello, one of the hosts of the social, who used to have the job that I then had at CP24 Breakfast, she was always such a wonderful, amazing friend and colleague, and just so encouraging and motivating. So I knew stepping into that role with her there, I was going to be
No
fine,
sweat.
because she's that girl. She's a girl's girl, and she's going to take care of you. And I got there, and all the women were so lovely and so wonderful. And, they're so smart and they're so good at what they do.
Yes.
It's a lot. It's a very, very difficult job. And
Yes.
they have to take in and consume so much information in such a short amount of time. And then they're live on the air and have to have very strong opinions about things.
Exactly.
With little to no time to really,
formulate, right?
Yes, which says a lot about who they are as people. So I was just honored to be amongst those women and to be invited to even fill in. And so I got to do that a couple of times. And then Marilyn Dennis, who, she's Marilyn Dennis.
Legendary.
She's awesome, an icon. And to be able to be on her show in any capacity, I was part of a fashion show. It was just, it was so nice where they, opened the door and said, hey, would you like to come on to do this or that? We thought you'd be great for a Halloween special or whatever it might've been. So that was really nice. That was independent of me leaving and then going to the competition, because they would never invite me back on.
Right.
Once I was, working for the competition, of course. Yes. But while over at Rogers, I got a different experience where I got to work at City Line with Tracy Moore.
Oh, that's so great. That was that beautiful interview, of course, that you did, where you finally shared something very personal, which was your fertility journey. And I just thought she also framed it beautifully. You look gorgeous on that show, by the way, in that blue dress. Thank you. Very tall. I never realized you were so tall. Yes. And like a model. And you went on that show, and you went on with our very own Prati Sharma, Dr. Prati Sharma, Create Fertility, and she was your doctor. So can you tell us about this? Because I think you were always sort of private about this. And what blows me away is that you had a really hard time, but no one knew it. That smile was always there. That professionalism was always apparent. You didn't fall apart. You didn't burn out. You just did it until you decided, I want to share.
Mm-hmm. And I did fall apart, but just behind the scenes. You never saw it, but I fell apart a lot because I'm human. But I think, Tracy Moore was the perfect person to do the interview. And we had talked about who I wanted to talk with. And she was just, again, she is somebody who uplifts other women. And she has been a constant in my career as that person who's just so positive and sweet. Even though we worked for competitors, I would see her at events, and she was so lovely. So I'm so glad it was her. And I knew she was going to handle my story, with kid gloves, because I think that's sort of the sensitivity you need when you talk about something so personal like fertility. It was almost 9 years of my life of dealing with struggles of trying to build a family. And there would be times where I would go to the clinic on my break, because I worked a morning show. I couldn't go in the morning. So I would take a break. I would go, draw blood and do all the stuff I had to do for my fertility treatments. And then I would come back to work and then be on air and, anchor the news and do my job. And there were times where I would go give blood, and then a few hours later would find out that I'm not pregnant yet again. And then I would go back on air and pretend like that didn't just happen. And the first time, second time, third time.
7
rounds of IVF and 11 embryo transfers. So there's just that much disappointment where nothing was working. And, privately, I was just in a place of, I just didn't even know who I was anymore, because all I've ever dreamed of was being a mom, and having that taken away from me, or feeling like that was out of my control, or that was something that maybe not be a part of my future in some way was just, it was too much to handle.
Mm,
I did take time off. I was in a very privileged position to be able to seek help and, get some therapy to be able to work through some of those feelings. Because I found when I went to therapy that I hadn't really, really dealt with it. Like, I think I had just learned with what I do for a living
mhm,
to sort of push it aside, focus. I'm live. I don't have a choice. I got to do my job and, be a professional and all those things. And I
mm,
think I got really good at doing that to the point where I probably wasn't dealing
mm,
with the emotions that came with this journey. And,
mhm.
I finally, when I took the time and I started to unravel a lot of those feelings,
Yes.
that's when I really started to do some healing. And I don't think I would have been ready
Mhm.
in those times to be able to talk about it. Um, it's a shame because so many people wait till after they get their happy ending to talk about it,
Yes.
which is what
Yes.
I did. And I didn't want to be that person because I think being in it in that moment, it's so important for other women who are also struggling to hear from someone who's struggling at the same time that they're not alone.
Yes.
Um, but I also had to protect my own mental health, and being in the public sphere means a
Yes.
lot of questions and a lot of judgments.
Yes.
And I wasn't ready for all of that on top of what I was already dealing with emotionally.
What do you think gave you, I know you're a fellow Pisces also. I have to just say that we have a Pisces sisterhood happening here.
That must be it.
What do you think gave you the confidence and the resolve to finally say, okay, enough. I'm a public person, but I'm going to share this. And was this around the time that you met Dr. Prati Sharma, or was that around the time that you thought, I'm ready to come and share my story and help other women? Or how did that all evolve?
I think Dr. Sharma, who's a fantastic doctor, I know you know her.
She
Your
is, I
husband works with
agree.
her very closely.
Yes.
She's amazing. And she was really the one who opened my eyes to building a family in a non traditional way. And, we had both of our babies via two separate surrogates. And that was certainly not the way I envisioned building a family or having a future. And I
Yeah.
think the more I was, enlightened with information and talking about these things, the more it was normalized for me. And I thought, why isn't this normalized for everyone else? And I
Mhm.
want to be part of those conversations. I want to start to normalize these conversations so that for the next person who's
Yes.
going through something so difficult, that is just
Yes.
so complex because there's so many layers to it, that at least there's somebody in a public space who's already talked about it, where they can be like, here, let me send you the link.
Yeah.
Let this be the
Yes.
explanation of what it is that I'm going through,
Yes.
so that it's easier to talk about. Because every time I talked about it, I felt better. And it wasn't this like secret, and it didn't come with shame, and it didn't come
Mhm.
with disappointment that, I wasn't giving my family the grandkid they always wanted, or,
Yeah.
the questions that I always got asked when, people would see me, you're married. Oh, you don't have any kids. Oh,
Brutal.
thinking that maybe I just wanted a career and didn't want to have kids or whatever, making
Oh,
assumptions about who I was as a person when it couldn't be farther from the truth.
yes.
So I was ready to be done with all of that
Mm,
and just start telling my truth and
yeah.
sharing my story and helping other people, hopefully, along the way.
What a relief that must have felt like when you did, after you got over sort of that moment of, oh my God, am I really doing this? But what a relief. And you have a fascinating story because, first of all, you have a very happy ending. You have two beautiful kids and you call them twiblings. And can you
Yes.
explain that extremely cool term?
So I guess it's a rare thing to have twiblings, but it's, two children who are born in the same year, essentially.
Yes.
Our babies are 3 months apart. And, they're related, they're siblings. They're actually from the same embryo batch as
Oh,
well.
wow.
So it's lovely. So in many ways, they are like twins. And there's
Yes.
times where I'm even starting to notice now that they're really looking alike. And so, they are twins, but they're not twins because there's a 3 month difference. They'll be in the
Yes.
same grade. They're going to go to school together.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that. I love
And
that.
so I had to learn the hard way when I was on mat leave. I would go to the park with them and, inevitably speak with other moms who are there with their kids, and they would ask how old they are. And then I would tell them, oh, they're 3 months apart. But then they'd look at me, like, how is that? even possible? So then I would have to tell them the story, and then I would get into it. And then the next thing I know, I'd be, going home with the stroller, and I'm like, I just spilled my entire life story to a complete stranger
Yes.
at the park. Why didn't I just say they're twins?
It's
It would have
true.
been a lot easier.
It's true.
So that's what I'm going with now. I just go with
It's
twins.
easier. It's easier. I'm with you on that. I was going to say you can't do any of this without a very supportive partner. I'm sure you can, but it makes it much easier. And you have a very romantic fairy tale love story. When you were at CP24, you met your husband, Paul Patek, at a birthday party. And as you were walking in, your husband, now Paul, was leaving, and a friend of yours said at the top of their lungs, "You guys would make a great match." You were mortified and left. But later that night, Patek returned in search of you. And 3 months later, you're engaged. You had a fairy tale wedding with 700 people. And what I love is that you got married, and then he had to go off to Scotland on a work situation 2 days after the wedding, and suddenly realized, oh my God, how could this be possible? I want to be with my beautiful bride. So he sent you a ticket to Paris. So, wow. Well, how would you describe that whole whirlwind period?
Oh, goodness. It's one of those things where, people say, when and I don't even know if I really know that to be true or if I believe any of that stuff. But what I do know is that it happened very quickly, but there was just this feeling of this has to be it because
Yeah,
he just seems so right for me. We truly are best friends. We love hanging out with each other,
so
and
great.
we're now 11 years in, and that's still the case. So there was just it was a feeling of it feeling right and feeling like home.
Mm,
Do I know anything about forever? I do not. I don't claim to. I just knew that this was somebody I'd want to take that leap of faith with.
it's great.
And so, yes, we had like wonderful stories, so many wonderful stories that led up to us meeting. We found out later that we actually met years ago
Oh,
and that
wow.
he was responsible for naming my nephew.
Ah,
It's a whole thing.
that's
It's a whole thing.
crazy.
We were at a wedding and he was the MC. I didn't know him at the time. My sister was pregnant with her son and he kept naming the groom with the nickname, and they loved the nickname so much that they named their child that nickname,
Oh my God.
not really, focusing on who the MC was. The MC was my husband. Fast forward, he meets my nephew and he goes, "Oh," and they put two and together and he's like, "I think I named you." And so
That's
anyway,
fabulous.
I
That's
I
fabulous.
really believe that it was meant to be.
And so I'm so happy for you about that, and I'm so happy for you about your children. And I what I also love about you, Pooja, is that you're a very outward focused person. Like, I know you do a lot of charity work, you do a lot of things for your community. But what I love is that after this whole thing that happened, and after you had your beautiful family, you could have just sort of rested on your laurels and said, "Okay, I'm busy enough doing the charity work, doing the speaking engagements, the keynotes, all the things that you do." Being a mentor to so many young girls, so many things, but you didn't. You said, you know what? I want to be a woman who helps other women. And you decided to become involved in a wonderful organization, Modern Miracle Foundation, and help other women have children the way you had been gifted, this beautiful thing of having you and your husband. And you could have just sort of said, okay, enough. I'm a really busy person. So I love that you're doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about Modern Miracle Foundation and why you're so passionate about it?
Yes, I mean, I think that the one thing that when they look back at the struggle and as difficult as it was, and everybody's journey is different, I do know that there's privilege in my story and that I could afford to try as many times as I did, that I could afford to have not one, but two surrogates help me bring my babies into the world. And who gets those opportunities? Not everybody. So in having that privilege, I also had to recognize that that shouldn't be a barrier to entry. That shouldn't be something that anybody, on top of it being as difficult as it is,
You're
to
right.
have to also worry about the finances of it. To have a choice of, do I keep my home or do I build a family, should never be something somebody has to contemplate. So what I wanted to do and what I striving to do even now is continue to give back to that charity in particular, because they help finance fertility treatments for couples who can't afford it. And, we need to get to a place where the government and everybody's involved in making sure that this is a thing. Corporations
Yes.
are doing this for their employees as part of their benefit packages. We need all of that to happen. But in the meantime, if I'm going to get paid for an appearance or to, help with a brand partnership or whatever that might be, for me, that's how I use that money, as I get to give it back
Love that.
to, families who are struggling.
Love that. You're a good person. You really are a very good person. And also, as you were saying all this, I was hearing your motivational speaker part of you at play just now. And you do a lot of speaking engagements and motivational talks. And I love what you say about rejection, which is it's something you won't accept. And when you get rejected, you never take no for an answer. What do you do?
So I have I don't know what it is about my personality, but I really have this, like, I'll show them kind of mentality.
Great.
It's almost like, I don't know if I'm proving it to myself or if I'm proving it to them, but I like the challenge of somebody maybe, not really thinking that I'm going to be capable, or maybe there's something disarming about my personality that people just sometimes dismiss me as, not being a force. So when I get told no, which is a part of life, and I fully expect to be told no, I make it my mission to say, okay, well, when that door doesn't open for you, my job is to kick it down. So I do all the things, which involves the work. I do the work
Yes.
to be able to kick down those doors. And,
Yeah.
I know
Great.
that's a very idealistic, simple way of looking at complex things and issues. But I really do believe that over the years, I've proven it to myself time and time again that if I do the work, and maybe that's not
Yes.
my path, maybe it leads me to another path. But if I do the work and it's something I really want, I can make it happen.
That's so fabulous. You also seem to have a really healthy view of beauty and of yourself. Like you're not hung up. I sort of feel like you're natural. You're gorgeous. Maybe that's part of it. It's easy to be that way. I don't know.
Sure.
But I recently interviewed Nina Devaluri, who was the first South Asian Miss America in 2014. She's actually a friend of my daughter's. They're both in musical theater in New York. And she recently did a documentary called Complexion, which explores stories of diversity and acceptance and attempts to disrupt old fashioned beauty standards. And in the film, she dives into stories of acceptance and self love and diversity and explains how the idea came to her after facing beauty pressures herself. I'm wondering if you could speak to the beauty pressures you face being on camera and in the public eye for the last 20 years, or are you just really good at rolling it off your back?
I mean, no, of course, just like anyone else, I'm self-conscious about lots of things. And I'm getting better at it, at, just really loving myself and for all the things. But I
Yes.
do realize it, whether it was my fertility journey, whether it was when I was at Global or, at CP24, I would have families come up to me and say, oh, we love watching you. Or my daughter, she watches you and she's like, oh, she's Indian, I'm Indian. And, she
Wow.
looks up to you, or you're like her big sister. And when people would say that to me, I really took it to heart that it's important for me to also be, somebody who represents them,
Yes.
and I have, that has to come with loving yourself, and that has to come with also not doing all the things like the filters and,
Mhm.
all the things that, distort what is beautiful,
Yes.
with all my imperfections. I've got lots of things that I don't like about me that I'm over the years have been like, okay, this is you and it's okay. And,
Yeah.
it's all good. But I take it very seriously. There's a responsibility, I feel like, in that.
Yes.
At the same time, I also think you got to do what makes you happy, and if you do you, I have no judgment for anybody who does something that makes them feel better, because when you feel
Yes.
good, and you look good, that can open other doors for you in so many other ways.
Yeah.
For me, though, it's really about the journey of self-love and, accepting myself with all of my insecurities and imperfections, because I really think that's what makes you unique.
And it makes you lovable, and that's why people love you so much. What advice do you have for people who are experiencing obstacles? And you just have a very healthy attitude, but there's an obstacle. I think you might have said it already about kick the door down when necessary, but just not let anything get in your way. Let me ask it this way. What are your tips on how to be resilient in a tough business when you're being scrutinized? Because we're all scrutinized.
Hmm.
How do you, or maybe you're not, I don't know, but I don't know if that's the case for you, but I think in every business on camera for sure, when you get that scrutiny, how
Yeah.
do you
I
cope with
think
that?
that again, it always comes back to doing the work. And I'm somebody who's always working on myself. I'm sort of a, work in progress always, changing, evolving, trying to learn, trying to do all the things. And so my advice is that whenever it comes down to so many of these things that just usually end up being very superficial and they don't matter,
Yes.
that at the end of the day, I always look inward to who am I, as a
Right.
person,
Yeah.
like who is that person who looks in the mirror at themselves every day? Am I proud of that person? Is that
Yes.
somebody that, I would want my daughter who's, only 18 months to look up to? Like that to me is the focus. And I, everything else then becomes noise. And if you start to sort of gain an understanding of people, the more you sort of learn and grow and meet people from all walks of life, you start to realize that the people who do that sort of thing, who scrutinize, who call out things that, really, why, what's your problem?
Yeah,
Why are
totally.
you doing this? It's usually a they problem. It's not a me problem. It's
Yes.
something that they're dealing with. It's an issue in their life. It's usually, sometimes it comes from their own insecurity or whatever that might be. And I think as you start to realize how complex people are, I'm okay with just being like, okay, they're going through their thing and I
Yeah.
hope they get through it and I wish them well, but that's not a me thing.
That's not me.
A
That's so
me
healthy.
thing is, yeah,
That's
is
so, so healthy.
who
And
I am.
I also really admired you, Pooja, during COVID, and I think you've always just been a very well-adjusted person, even when you went through the hardest time with fertility. But during COVID, you had a moment where you had a little anxiety, like all of us, and you shared that, and you just do healthy things. I love the way you say you walk. You're not into some crazy fitness routine. You're just a walker. I am too, so I really relate to that. Did you adopt any other wellness tips during that time that you still utilize today during that
Well,
whole COVID?
I love self-care. I love that hashtag self-care.
Me too.
Everything falls under the umbrella of self-care. So
Yes,
it's wonderful. It's okay. Like it kind of gave us permission to be like, listen, I'm going to be selfish in this moment because it's not selfish at all to take care of yourself.
you're right.
But I really think it's so important to fill your cup with whatever that might be. If it's indulging with pizza and that fills your cup, because I know that is pizza and pasta is the way to my heart.
I know.
Uh,
Same.
yes. I mean, if that's,
Tironi. Okay, I said it.
yes. If that's what it
Yeah.
is, perfect. Whatever it might be, if it's reading, if it's taking time for yourself, I
Yes.
need an exorbitant amount of me time, which you don't really get as much anymore. But I try to find little bits here and there. The
Yes.
walking, being in nature really makes a difference. I did start working out finally, so those
That's
endorphins are
great.
probably doing something. I'm told. Still hate it every time I have to do it, but maybe one day. Um, so I think there's all of those things which help, but anxiety is a very real thing, and it creeps up on me. It's one of those things that you really have to practice. And some people, there's obviously a spectrum of people who experience anxiety. I would say that for me, I had a very mild sort of case of it, but enough
Yes.
for me to realize that I could very easily spiral
Mm,
where my thoughts start to become, but what if this and what if that? And
mm.
usually happens right before bed,
Yeah.
you're trying to close your eyes.
There's the 478. So off the top,
Yes.
at the beginning of every show, we do a little breathing off camera, and I read that you do the 478 breathing, which is fantastic.
I got to get back to it. I haven't done it in a while, but
It's
when
so good. It's
it's
so
so
good.
good. When I was
Even if you
going
do
through,
3, like I say to people, do 3 of those breaths in the morning,
yeah,
and then in the middle of your day, like if you're grocery shopping or you're in your car and you're at a light and you're just going, "Oh my god, I've got to get somewhere." Do the breathing there and then do it before bed.
breathing,
Beautiful.
go figure, is such a great, amazing,
The
wonderful thing
best.
for so many things. Yes. And you do have to remind yourself that, look, life is difficult. There's so much happening right now in the world, as you know, and sometimes it feels like the world is on fire.
Yes.
How do you go through your everyday life? How do I imagine a future for my children with
Yes.
everything that's going on and not
Absolutely.
get overwhelmed and not feel anxious? Of course, I'm going to feel all those things.
Yeah.
So it's so important to practice these things that, again, fill your cup, fill your soul, take care of
Absolutely.
you. it's not selfish. It's so important to do.
Do you have a favorite quote that you love to live by? I mean, there's so many wonderful ones, but one that
Oh,
comes to
so
your mind when you need it?
I mean, I love when you know better, you do better. I love that one.
Yes.
I believe that's Maya Angelou. I love empowered women empower women.
Yes.
That's my favorite one because I have been so lucky in my career to be around such fabulous, amazing, accomplished, smart, wonderful, wonderful women who,
Yes.
from all walks of life, who are just so giving. And there's this understanding that there's room for all of us and that
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a competition and it doesn't have
100%.
to be any of those things where, we compare ourselves to our success versus your success. There is so much love that I've experienced from
Yes.
other women that I just want to spread that. More of that,
I
please.
love that. And you mentor young people, which is so amazing. What advice would you give to a young person who's looking at you and saying, wow, I want to be Pooja Handa one day? Or maybe even an older person on this program who's going, I want to reinvent myself and reimagine, and dreams have no expiry date. What would you say to them? What advice would you give them?
Well, you shouldn't want to be anybody else other than you. That's first and foremost.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. But I think it just, I look back and, you do that whole, what would older Pooja tell younger Pooja? And I was just this awkward, very insecure young woman. And I think older Pooja would tell younger Pooja, first of all, I would give her a hug.
Ah.
Just give her a hug and
Nice.
just say, it's going to be okay. And that, in time, you are going to start to see all of the things that you offer, that you have to offer, that are wonderful and beautiful about you. And it's going to take some time, but you're going to get there. And the more you practice it, because it's also practice, I don't think it comes naturally to us to be able to do those things. But
It's
with
true.
practice and with some self love, you can get there.
It's so true. Is there something that you still dream of doing that would be a dream gig for you? You're very young, so there's
Oh.
lots of time. A dream gig for you in your career.
Oh my goodness, where do I start? I still have so many dreams. Is it okay to keep dreaming at 45? Yes, of course it is. So I would love to have a talk show, my own talk show. We live in such a different place now where, media and the platforms, there's so many options. It doesn't even have to be on traditional, media the way we know it. A talk show could really be anything. And there's no reason why I can't do that tomorrow if I wanted to, but I'd love to
Yes.
do that. I'd love to go back to acting. How fun would that be to do something that I started off loving so
I love
much and be
that.
able to come back full circle? I would love to be able to do that. I mean, and then there's the another part of me that just wants to like leave it all behind and
Travel.
start a business or,
Yeah.
just do something or like own a restaurant and have coffee all day.
Will you come back one day and tell us about your part two?
I would love to.
I would love that
Yes.
too. There's a question we ask everyone at the end of the show. So, of course, we're going to ask you, what is bliss for Pooja Handa?
Hmm. What is bliss? Okay, right now, and I'm at that life stage, right, where my babies are my everything and they're my bliss. I think about them nonstop all day, every day. I do work, so I'm at work, and even when I'm at work, I have the little monitor on and I'm watching them sleep. All they're doing is sleeping, and I'm watching that as well. But it's amazing to me how almost every thought I have in the day is about them in some way, shape, or form. But it's not like, oh, the kids. It's like, oh my goodness, I have these two beautiful smiling faces that
Oh,
are waiting for me when I get home every single day. And it's beautiful.
it's everything. And by the way, guess what? It doesn't change. I have a 23-year-old and a
Oh,
26-year-old, and I feel exactly the same
I'm
way.
so happy to hear that. I
So
love that.
I want to thank you very much. This has been a delightful honor to have you on this show today. Really, it's been lovely. It's been blissful.
Oh, thank you, Judy. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. And before you go anywhere, what is the best way for people to contact you, connect with you on social media? I know you have a beautiful website, social media. How do we find you?
The best thing is to just follow me on Instagram at Pooja Honda TV.
Awesome.